here with the two prophets. Very interesting. Got two guys showing up on the scene representing God. Let's meet them. There was given to me a reed, chapter 11, verse 1, like a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and those that worship therein. Now, when it says the temple, that word there means the inner sanctuary. It doesn't mean the temple building. So, like, if you imagine like a gigantic temple, like a temple in Israel, you've got this gigantic building, and in the middle of it, there's this little 20-foot by 20-foot room. Right in the middle of it. More toward the end, actually. It's not right in the middle, but it's like, if it's long, it's over here on this side, right? So, over here, it's a rectangle, and over on this end of it, there's this little 20-foot room, and this 20-foot by 20-foot room is where the holy place is. That's where the altar is at, where the offerings are made, the blood sacrifice is taken once a year by the high priest for the sins of the nation. That's where God meets with the prophets when God descends and comes to the temple. That is where the Lord sits, the cherubim. It says that he sits between the cherubim. All right? So, we have this word right here, and it means that little 20 by 20 room. So when it says temple, that's the part it's talking about. So rise up and measure that little 20 by 20 room, and the altar, which is the altar of incense just out in front of it, and those that worship. So if you can imagine, you've got, if I'm sitting in the holy place where God sits, and I'm looking out the curtain, right in front of me would be the altar of incense, and right in front of that would be an area where people could stand and worship. All right? You had to be cleansed to be there. You couldn't just be the average Joe. You had to be special. You had to be the priesthood to be in front of that altar. The only people that were allowed in the inner sanctuary, which is what it was called, were the priests and the Levites. The rest of the people were outside by the altar of sacrifice, which is right at the entrance of the temple. The temple building. So you would come to the front door and you would lay your offering there. You would offer it to the priest. The priest would make the offering on your behalf to God, and then you would turn around and you'd walk away. You'd never even go inside. The priests and the Levites could. They could walk in and out. But the holy place was only allowed. Only one person could ever go in there, and that was the high priest. Only once per year also. And only after the high priest had made sacrifices and cleansed himself and done what God had said to prepare himself in his heart. Matter of fact, when the high priest would go in, he had a special garment that he would wear that had bells on the bottom. Little tassels that had bells that would tinkle. So that as he would walk around, you could hear. And when he would walk in, they would tie a rope to his foot. Because if he did not do what he needed to do to purify himself before he stepped into the presence of God, he would die. And they would, if they stopped hearing the tinkling of the bells, they knew the priest had died, and they would pull on the rope, and they would pull the dead priest out of the Holy of Holies. So it was nothing that you jack around with. If you're going to walk into the presence of God, you're going to be pure, or you're not going to live. He's saying here, measure that Holy of Holies place, the area just outside of it where the altar of incense is at, and the space just in front of that where the priests and the Levites can worship. But the court that is without the temple, in other words, the one that's on the outside, remember where I said people will come up and they'll make their offering, they'll turn around, they'll walk away? There's a big courtyard right out in front where people wait to get their turn to come and bring their sacrifice up to the priest. But the court which is outside the temple, leave out and don't measure it, for it is given to the Gentiles. And the holy city they will tread underfoot 42 months. Okay, this is where we've got to put our ears up, because now we're getting some more detail. We've had a lot of generalities, right, up to this point. We've started seeing percentages, a third here, a third there, all of this, all of that. 100%, 100%, 30%, 33%, 33%, potentially 25%, we don't know, that one's up for grabs, right? But now we're getting time. Here we see that the outer court is given to the Gentiles for 42 months. 42 months. And I will give, just real quick, 42 divided by 12 is what? Quick, somebody. Peter, what is it? 42 divided by 12.
44.
3.5 years.
There you go. That's not what, that's 3.5.
Yeah.
That's right. 40, so you got 42 months, right? So 36 is 3, and 6 months plus that is 3.5. So we know here that on a 12-month calendar, we got 3.5 years, right? So these two men, it says that the Gentiles will trod that outer court for 3.5 years, 42 months. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days in sackcloth. 1,260 days. Now, if you take 1,260 and you divide it by 360, what do you get? Somebody said 3.5. You're right. Good job. 3.5. So the prophets get 3.5 years, and the Gentiles also get 42 months. Now, why would it say 42 months in one place and 1,260 days right next to it? Aren't they the same? 42 months is 3.5 years. 1,260 days is 3.5 years. Why didn't you just say 42 months both places? Anybody have an idea?
Would it be to clue you in on why one equals the other?
Well, it could be. Could be. Might be a clue. So here's something to keep in mind. Ready? All Jewish months aren't created equal. Some months have 28 days. Some have 29 days. There are 13 Jewish months in a calendar year. Sometimes there are 12, let's see here, it bounces between 12 and 13. It's like the keys of a piano. If you can imagine the keys. So you got the white keys and the black keys, right? So if you start, it's interesting that the Jewish year follows the piano. If you start with middle C, that year has 12, the next year has 13, then it's 12, then it's 13, then it's 12, then it's 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 12. So it follows the keys of the keyboard, as I recall. Something close to that. But it's interesting, if you look at, I've got a picture somewhere, if you look at the keys of a keyboard, the Jewish calendar follows the black and white keys on a keyboard. That opens up an entirely different conversation. It's the line between, anyways, well, we can talk about that later, but you get the idea. It follows that pattern. When you look at that, so it's possible that 42 months may not be 1,260 days. Because by the time you do 28 days one month, 29 days another month, 28 days a month, 28 days, 29, I don't know if there's any months that have 30. It seems to me like there may be a month in there that has 30, but they're variable. You got 13 months instead of 12 one year and 12 months the next. Measuring something by months could end up being anywhere from 1,234 days to 1,290 days, I think, or 1,292 or something like that. I don't remember the calculation, but